Think you know aviation? Think again. What if I told you there was once a flying machine that required pilots to literally stand on top of high-speed, spinning blender blades? Later in this video, we will show you that exact terrifying death trap. Welcome to the Wild West of bizarre aviation history, where visionary engineers threw standard aerodynamics out the window to build the craziest flying machines imaginable. From jet-powered farm equipment to giant flying whales that helped us reach the moon, we are counting down 10 bizarre vintage aircraft you have never seen before. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments, what is the weirdest vehicle you have ever seen? Starting off our countdown at number 1 is the Miles Aerovan, a British twin-engine transport aircraft from 1945 that completely redefined the concept of a flying box. The dream was highly practical. Engineers wanted a cheap, short-haul freighter carrying a massive 3,000-pound payload using very low power. They needed a workhorse to load standard family cars without specialized equipment. However, the reality of physics turned it into a bizarre, tadpole-shaped contraption. To accommodate massive rear-loading doors, the tail boom was positioned unnaturally high, making it top-heavy and slow. If you look at the Miles Aerovan, it does not look like a traditional airplane. It looks exactly like a vintage camper van that someone accidentally glued a pair of wings onto. Imagine taking a classic Airstream trailer, flattening the sides, adding a massive bubble window at the front for the pilot, and strapping it to a tricycle undercarriage. It looks like a prop straight out of a claymation movie, waddling through the sky with all the grace of a flying brick. It completely ignored the sleek aesthetic of the 1940s for pure interior cargo volume. Despite its ridiculous appearance, you have to admire the sheer, unfiltered practicality of the design. It prioritized function over form to an extreme degree, cruising at a sluggish 112 miles per hour. Would you be willing to take a cross-country flight in a slow-flying caravan like this, or would you prefer a regular passenger jet? Let me know your thoughts down below. But if you think a flying camper van is weird, just wait until you see the Soviet Union's highly successful attempt at making a military cargo plane that looks like a sad cartoon character. Moving on to number 2, we have the Antonov An-72, a Soviet transport aircraft that looks like it is constantly surprised to be flying. The dream in 1977 was ambitious. The military needed a rugged aircraft capable of operating in harsh environments on unpaved Siberian runways. To achieve incredible lift, engineers utilized the Coanda effect. By mounting 2 massive turbofan engines aggressively forward and directly above the wings, high-speed exhaust gases blew over the wing surface. This generated immense extra lift at very low speeds, creating a highly successful but weird-looking aircraft. Because of those 2 huge jet engines perched right on top of the wings, staring forward like a pair of giant, wide-set eyes, the aircraft quickly earned a hilarious pop culture nickname. The Soviets affectionately called it Cheburashka, named after a famous big-eared Russian cartoon character. To Western observers, it looks a bit like a sad flying bulldog or perhaps a mechanical frog puffing out its metallic cheeks. The way the engines bulge over the fuselage completely throws off the visual balance, making it look cartoonishly disproportionate and incredibly front-heavy. It is a brilliant piece of aerodynamic engineering hidden behind a very goofy, staring face. It is a heavy lifter, capable of carrying over 16,000 pounds of cargo while taking off in less than 2,000 feet. If you were an aerospace engineer, would you sacrifice a sleek design just to get better lift on a snowy runway? Drop a comment and tell me what you think. And speaking of weird staring faces, our next aircraft was literally designed to look like a giant bug hovering silently in the sky above you. At number 3, we have the Edgley Optica, a British light aircraft that first flew in 1979 and looks more like an insect than an airplane. The dream was to create a low-cost, fixed-wing alternative to helicopters for aerial observation and police patrols. Helicopters are notoriously expensive to maintain and incredibly loud. John Edgley's brilliant solution was to build an aircraft with a fully glazed panoramic cabin placed directly in front of a slow-turning ducted fan. The reality was a bizarre science fiction-looking machine that cruised very slowly and quietly. Visually, the Edgley Optica is the closest humanity has ever come to building a mechanical dragonfly. The cockpit is a giant glass bubble that looks exactly like the compound eye of a massive bug, while the ducted fan directly behind it looks like a small jet engine that got squished between twin tail booms. If you are a science fiction fan, it instantly reminds you of the bubble-canopied TIE fighters from Star Wars, or perhaps a futuristic escape pod. It is the ultimate flying observatory, completely alien compared to any standard light aircraft. It offers one of the absolute best views in aviation history, cruising leisurely at around 80 miles per hour. Would you feel safe flying inside a giant glass bubble with a massive fan strapped right to your back? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you think the Optica looks strange, wait until you see an aircraft so impossibly fat and heavy, it was literally used to carry pieces of space rockets across the United States. Coming in at number 4 is the Aero Spacelines Super Guppy, a plane that proves aerodynamics is sometimes just a polite suggestion. The dream for this colossal machine was born during the 1960s space race. NASA had a massive logistical nightmare, transporting the gigantic stages of the Saturn V rocket from California to Florida. Moving them by boat took weeks. The wild solution was to take a Boeing transport, cut it open, and graft a comically large bloated upper fuselage onto it. The reality was an aircraft so impossibly huge that engineers initially doubted it could fly. When you look at the Super Guppy, you are essentially looking at a pregnant metallic whale swimming gracefully through the clouds. It looks like a normal vintage airliner that accidentally swallowed a blimp whole. The entire front nose section is hinged, swinging open 110 degrees like a giant gaping mouth to devour oversized cargo. In pop culture, it resembles a gigantic silver zeppelin that decided to grow wings, or maybe a cartoon caricature of an airplane. It is so utterly massive that it actively hurts your brain trying to understand its flight. Despite its hilarious bloated shape, this 50,000-pound flying whale was crucial. Without it, the Apollo moon landings might have been significantly delayed. Do you think modern cargo companies should bring back this giant bloated design for oversized freight? I want to read your opinions below. But if the Super Guppy was a triumph of engineering for space exploration, our next aircraft is a textbook example of a terrible idea involving a jet engine and a heavy farm tractor. Number 5 brings us to the absolute madness of the PZL M-15 Belphegor. The dream here was pure Soviet agricultural ambition in the 1970s, brought to life by Polish engineers. The Soviet airline wanted a modern, highly efficient crop duster to cover massive state-owned farms. For some inexplicable reason, officials insisted it needed to be powered by a jet engine to keep up with the jet age. The reality was a horrifying amalgamation of technologies. It was a slow-flying biplane equipped with massive chemical hoppers and screaming across the fields with a thirsty turbofan engine. The Belphegor looks exactly like a vehicle custom-built for a villain in a post-apocalyptic Mad Max movie. It is an unholy marriage between a 1920s biplane and a modern jet, painted in utilitarian colors and dripping with chemical sprayers. With its twin tail booms and the jet engine awkwardly mounted on top of the short fuselage, it looks like a piece of heavy industrial farm equipment that somehow gained the ability to fly. It quickly earned its nickname, named after a noisy mythological demon, perfectly describing the screaming monster terrifying farmers from the sky. Weighing over 12,000 pounds fully loaded, it proudly holds the title as the only jet-powered biplane crop duster in aviation history. Why do you think engineers thought putting a fast jet engine on a slow biplane was a good idea? Let's debate in the comments. Now, if combining a jet and a biplane sounds crazy, wait until you see an American fighter plane that completely struggled to decide what era of history it actually belonged to. At number 6, we have the Ryan FR Fireball, a United States Navy fighter plane struggling with a massive technological identity crisis. The dream in 1944 was to bridge the dangerous gap between reliable propeller aircraft and the brand-new, unproven technology of jet engines. Early jets were notoriously slow to accelerate, making them incredibly dangerous for aircraft carrier landings. The Navy's solution was a mixed-power aircraft equipped with a conventional piston engine and propeller in the nose, alongside a hidden turbojet engine tucked away in the rear fuselage for high-speed combat. The Ryan FR Fireball is the absolute mullet of the military aviation world. Traditional business in the front, jet-age party in the back. From a head-on view, it looks like a standard classic World War II propeller fighter. But as it passes by, you notice the suspicious lack of side exhaust pipes and the gaping jet nozzle hiding in the tail section. It is a technological Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It looks as if engineers took two completely different aircraft blueprints, cut them in half, and welded them together in a dark hangar. It was a heavy hybrid, weighing over 10,000 pounds, but it was doomed from the start as pure jet technology rapidly improved. Would you rather fly a reliable propeller plane or a pure jet instead of this confusing heavy hybrid? Drop your preference in the comments. And as we move into the top 4, things are going to get much more futuristic, starting with a machine that looks straight out of a science fiction cartoon. Landing at number 7 is the Piasecki VZ-8 Airgeep, the United States military's literal attempt at creating a flying car. The dream in the late 1950s was to give the Army a versatile vehicle that could do everything a standard Jeep could do, but effortlessly glide over any terrain, including swamps and steep mountains. The Army wanted a low-flying, rugged transport vehicle that ordinary soldiers could easily drive without pilot training. Piasecki Aircraft's bold solution was using two massive horizontal ducted rotors placed directly in front of and behind the pilot in a tandem configuration. Looking at the Airgeep, you immediately think of hoverboards or a real-life speeder bike from the forests of Endor in Star Wars. It is essentially a flat, rectangular metal platform measuring 26 feet long, with two giant fans cut into it and a couple of standard seats bolted right in the middle. The pilot and passengers sat completely exposed to the elements, hovering just a few feet off the ground in a machine that looked like a giant militarized drone built half a century before drones were common. It is a technological tragedy that this 2,000-pound flying Jeep never made it into full mass production because helicopters proved more capable. Do you think modern soldiers could use a hovering troop transport like the Airgeep today? Let me know what you think. But if you think the Airgeep was a wild concept, wait until you hear the deafening roar of our next machine, which tried to be a helicopter and a passenger airliner at the exact same time. Screaming in at number 8 is the Fairey Rotodyne, a brilliant British marvel of engineering that was ultimately killed by its own voice. The dream in the late 1950s was revolutionary: create a large compound gyroplane that could pick up 40 passengers in London and drop them off in Paris, bypassing congested airports entirely. It used two conventional turboprop engines for fast-forward flight. But for vertical takeoff, it utilized a massive top rotor powered by tip jets, small jet nozzles literally mounted on the tips of the rotor blades, fed by compressed air and fuel. The Fairey Rotodyne is a pure mid-century steampunk fantasy brought to glorious life. It is an enormous, sleek airliner that somehow has a massive, heavy helicopter rotor bolted securely to its roof. The sight of this giant machine lifting straight up into the air, with literal jet flames shooting out of the tips of its 90-foot spinning blades in the twilight, was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. It looks like a retro-futuristic transport vehicle from a sci-fi comic book, a beautiful but monstrous chimera of aviation design. Unfortunately, the sound it produced was a percussive noise so aggressive it could shatter windows, dooming the 70,000-pound aircraft forever. If engineers could figure out a way to silence the engines, would you commute to work in a giant gyroplane flying at almost 200 miles per hour? Tell me your thoughts below. Our next aircraft also tried to combine a plane and a helicopter, but it attempted a maneuver so incredibly dangerous, it pushed the boundaries of aerodynamics to the breaking point. Coming in at number 9 is the Sikorsky S-72 X-Wing, a project that attempted one of the most dangerous aerodynamic concepts in history, the stopped rotor. The dream for this NASA project in the 1980s was the ultimate holy grail of aviation. They wanted an aircraft that could take off and hover perfectly like a helicopter, but then fly at the high subsonic speeds of a jet. The audacious plan was to use a massive rigid 4-blade rotor to lift off vertically. Then, as it gained forward speed, the pilot would completely stop the spinning blades mid-air. Visually, the S-72 in its X-Wing configuration looks like a standard sleek jet fighter that someone forcefully hammered a giant, thick cross onto. When parked on the tarmac, it looks exactly like an X-Wing starfighter from Star Wars, hence the project's name, but mounted horizontally on a conventional fuselage. It is deeply unsettling to look at because your brain knows that helicopter blades are supposed to spin and airplane wings are supposed to be straight. Seeing 4 massive thick blades locked in an X pattern feels like a glitch in the matrix of aerospace design. Attempting to stop a spinning rotor at over 200 miles per hour was an aerodynamic nightmare, and the project was canceled before it could be fully tested. Would you have the courage to be the test pilot for the heavily modified, structurally terrifying X-Wing? Let's hear your bravery in the comments. And now it is time for our final aircraft. If you thought the X-Wing was crazy, our number 1 pick is so insanely dangerous it will make your blood run cold. Finally, at number 10, we have reached the absolute pinnacle of aviation madness, the Lackner HZ-1 Aero cycle, a flying machine that was essentially a weaponized airborne lawnmower. The dream in the mid-1950s was to provide every single foot soldier with a personal flying machine for reconnaissance. The Army wanted a flying motorcycle so incredibly easy to fly, a standard infantryman could master it in just 20 minutes using kinesthetic control, simply leaning your body to steer. The design was shockingly simple: a small 40-horsepower outboard motor, a tiny platform, and 2 counter-rotating helicopter blades. The Aero cycle is pure, unfiltered nightmare fuel. It is the real-world equivalent of the Green Goblin's glider from Spider-Man, but designed by someone with absolutely zero regard for basic occupational safety. The horrifying reality? Those unshielded razor-sharp blades with a massive 15-foot diameter were positioned directly below the pilot's feet. Imagine strapping yourself to a tiny metal pole, revving up a massive exposed blender directly beneath your combat boots, and leaning your body weight to steer while hovering 50 feet in the air without a parachute. One strong gust of wind, one loss of balance at its maximum speed of 75 miles per hour, and the pilot would fall directly into the spinning rotors. Unsurprisingly, the military realized giving teenagers flying meat grinders was a terrible strategic idea. Look closely at this thing. Would you step onto the Aero cycle for $1 million? I genuinely want to know. Leave your answer in the comments right now. And there you have it. 10 of the most bizarre and dangerous vintage aircraft that actually took to the skies. The history of aviation is built on brilliant engineers who bravely pushed the absolute boundaries of what is possible, even if it meant building a terrifying flying death trap. Which of these wacky flying machines was your absolute favorite? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this wild ride, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell. See you next time.